Page. It just has two buttons, one for opening the game and one for the rules. This rules page is a little bit more comprehensive than the one that's going to be on our game. It kind of goes over how each card is assigned a value and the general gameplay. So then close rules will just close this page, and then you can press open game. And when you open the game, it will take you to our main ML app page as well as close the start page. And then this is our start page. Okay, we'll press start game, and then deal cards. Okay, player 1 is at a score of 17, so we'll hit. Then player 1 is at 21, so we'll stand. Player 2 will hit. Then player 2 will hit again, and player 2 will stand. Then both of these players tied, so they have a score of 21. Now we'll press end game, and when you press end game, it will display the final totals for each player. So as you can see, player 1 has 1 win, player 2 has 1 win, and then the dealer has 2 wins. And then if you just go back, you can see that it also reset the wins for each player back to 0. So this is our start page. The code is really simple. There's just 2 buttons. When you press the rules button, it opens the start rules MLAP, which is over here, and this one also only has 1 button, which closes our start rules MLAP. And then the second button will open up our main game.
So for the starting code for our main game, we initialized a lot of properties, and with these properties, it'll store the data that we can use later in the code simply by doing app.theProperty for the different UI features.
And then this is our startup function. It just initializes everything, like our player score as 0, the current turn as 1, and it'll display different messages, like the game has started, and to move on to the...
So then for the pushing the start game button, it initializes and shuffles the deck. So it'll have our 52 cards, and it randomizes that, giving 2 to each player and 2 to the dealer. And it resets the cards and the scores, so the cards are an empty set of cards until they're dealt, and then the scores start as 0, and it displays on the label text that the game has started and to press the deal cards button.
Once you press the deal cards button, it'll find the sound and play the sound called card shuffle, and then it basically sets the 2 cards for each player at a specific axis, so they show up at a specific point on the game screen.
And then is the player 1 hit button, where first it loads the sound, and then when you press the hit button, it will take another card to add to the next axes and also update the score of player 1.
And then for the player 1 stand button, it'll turn off player 1's buttons so that they can't hit or stand since it's not their turn anymore, and turn it on for player 2 so that the text will then say player 1 stands, player 2's turn. So it's basically just turning over the turn from player 1 to player 2, and then it'll update the game state.
For player 2's hit button and stand button, it's essentially the same code as for player 1. It'll just be all for player 2. So once player 2's stand button is pushed, it'll show the score from that round and what the dealer score ended up being.
Yes, and also forgot to say, but when you do the hit button, if you end up busting, it won't let you hit again and it'll automatically move on to the next player's turn.
And then for our rules button push, it'll pop up a window with all the text. It'll pop up a white window, and it'll turn off some of our other labels just to make it look better. And it'll display the simplified rules that aren't on the start page. And then it'll also pop up the close rules button once you do open the rules. And that will, once you pressed, that'll turn off it'll turn on the labels that we once turned off, and it'll refresh back to the start page so that you can hit start and start your game.
For the reset button, it'll reset the round of the game, but it will keep all of the scores. So it's essentially part of the same game, but it's a different round. So the text underneath each of the players, the scores will continue updating for each of the rounds.
And then for the end games, it will display a little window that has the total wins for each player, as well as resetting the win totals for each player back to 0.
And then we're going to go up back to our functions that are in our methods for private. So our dealer turn function is one of our main functions because it kind of does it on its own after the player 2 stands or player 2 busts. So it'll reveal that upside down card with the back image displayed, and it will have all of these different scenarios where if the dealer scores less than 17, according to the rules of blackjack, it'll make them hit again. And so the dealer can hit, and they either bust or they have a score below 21, which is then compared to the scores of player 1 and player 2. So if everybody busts, meaning they all have a score over 21, then the dealer automatically wins. And then if the dealer busts and the other 2 players, or whichever player we're looking at, has a score less than 21, then that player wins, and it goes to our determine winner function, which Stella will explain.
Yeah, so the determine winners, it basically just has a lot of different scenarios for example, if player 1 score is greater than 21, then player 1 will it will display that player 1 will bust, and it'll kind of just keep going through these different scenarios to find out which one wins. Player 2 is basically the same. And then also with the rules of blackjack, if 2 player scores are tied, then that means that they push. So it'll display a push, and that doesn't count as a win or a loss.
For the calculate score function, it will take all of the cards. So for example, if the player 1 hit, then it'll take the value of that card and add it to its score. However, with the rules of blackjack, if the ace has a specific type of score count, so there's code including that as well. And this function will calculate the score for both player 1, 2, as well as the dealer. So there's more while statements showing this code.
And then for the show confetti function, this is so that we can call it when one of the players wins, not when the dealer wins. And so for this, it just has an axis with random particles and just the confetti function, but we made it a function so that it's callable when one of the players wins and just makes it shorter to include in the win function.
Do we need to go over this part? Okay.
And then our last one is for the update win labels, just saying that player 1 wins or player 2 wins, and it concatenates them together so that if both players win against the dealer, it'll show one big text that says player 1 wins and then player 2 wins, and it'll trigger the confetti and the applause sound.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.